thank you so much for coming today. My name is Taylor Lorenz, and I'm a technology columnist at the Washington Post, where I cover online culture, a lot to do with youth culture, stuff like that. And to my left are our amazing panelists. We have Della Volpe. He is the director of polling at Harvard Kennedy School's Institute of Politics and founder and CEO of SocialSphere, a public opinion and analytics company. He's an advisor on youth and politics. He most recently served as a pollster and strategic communications advisor to Joe Biden's 2020 campaign. And he's also the author of Fight, How Gen Z is Channeling Their Passion and Fear to Save America, which is a new book about some of the stuff we're going to get into today. And then I have Sofia here, digital strategy coordinator for Gen Z for Change, creating tools to streamline digital civic engagement on issues from the climate crisis to inclusive education. She previously developed the app Redawn to support survivors of sexual violence. She's taught over 140 underrepresented peers of hers how to code through the Code with Klossy program. She also has almost 300,000 followers on TikTok. And then we have Aidan. Oh, we should clap. And then we have Aidan, founder of and executive director of Gen Z for Change, a nonprofit advocacy coalition of over 500 social media creators leveraging their platforms for social justice. With an audience of over 500 million, Gen Z for Change is a leader in progressive politics. Throughout it, Aidan has led partnerships with the White House, Fair Fight, Made to Save, the Biden campaign, Harvard Institute of Politics, March On, Accountable Tech, and more. So thanks for chatting. Highly qualified people. So I thought I would start off with the question that we were all brought here to sort of answer, which is how can we build trust across generations? And specifically, does anyone over the age of 25 deserve our trust? Why and why not? I'll start with you, Aidan.
Starting off easy.
How old are you, by the way, Aidan?
Oh yeah, so I'm 18. I graduated from Georgetown Day School 2 weeks ago, and I'm very excited to be here. Thank you. And I think that trust is a complicated word where there are absolutely adult allies who are over the age of 25 who provide and can lend the necessary support that we do not have as young people, and can provide the resources to fuel the work that we're already doing. And there is absolutely a lot to learn from older generations. But the notion of trusting adults to solve everything and to fix the world is something that I think we have, over time, definitely lost faith in.
Sofia, what do you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I also think that trust is a I don't want to say a convoluted term, but it means a lot of different things, right? So it's like, it's leaning in, it's building relationships and all of that. And while I think that that's very important, there's also a lot that, like, with our upbringing, you know, going through puberty on social media, which I hated a lot. And it was, I wouldn't say a complete fault of my own. I think that, like, the people running these tech companies, for example, like, as adults had the responsibility to protect us, right? So I think that it's a double-edged sword for sure. Like, there's more work that needs to be done. And I think that trust is substantially more earned than innately given.
I think from my perspective, let's start with the data and the facts that show that basically, like, your parents and your grandparents' generations writ large, they don't trust you, nor do they really even like young people so much. For example, it's true. It's completely true. Right?
I would hope that my mom was a fan of mine.
Of course. But I did a poll when we did like a general, like, do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the following people, institutions, and groups? And when we asked folks over the age of 50 their views of younger Americans, by a 2-to-1 margin, they have unfavorable views. In a recent poll I did earlier this year, only 40% of folks over 35 had trust in the next generation to solve these issues. So it's a two-way street, and I think like the purpose of my book was to try to be kind of an interpreter between the generations. And to establish trust and respect, I think that, like, folks of other generations need to just appreciate the lived experience that Gen Zers have had. They don't just want, like, they don't remember a time in their lifetimes when America was truly united, right? Aidan and Sofia don't remember September 12th or September 13th. And while so many other generations have had tremendous chaos and trauma through their lived experience, of which I'm sure we'll talk about how that's impacted what you're into and pursuing, other generations still saw us come together. Baby boomers saw the moonwalk, Gen X saw US beat the Russians, the Olympics, and so many other things. Millennials actually saw September 12th and 13th. That's been robbed, and that's an important place, I think, to start in terms of the perspective of just appreciating the lifetime and the difficulties that you've had as a generation.
If I can ask a question, what I'm curious about is do you think
Seizing power right away.
do you think that this is unique to Gen Z and Gen X, or like, because I feel like there is the general notion, like the lack of trust between the older generations and the younger generations throughout history in general with any developments. Do you agree?
I think that this is taken to a different level where there's just not mistrust, but as I said, like just negative feelings for a group with no real rationale kind of behind it, right? And I just think it's so important to kind of again appreciate that. You know, just a few other statistics like that. 52% of folks in your generation, several times the last 2 weeks, have dealt with feelings of hopelessness and depression in a significant way. 25% say it's been so bad that they've thought of self-harm. 5% every single day. You know the work, obviously, that you've done around sexual violence, and you know it's something that affects millions and millions of young people. So just the weight beyond technology that this generation has had to deal with and then try to overcome is something that it's difficult, I think, for parents, you know, and mentors and just other members of the other generation to kind of get their heads around a little bit. And just the other statistic is, if you're a baby boomer or even an older Gen Xer, you could work one summer job, minimum wage, cut grass or serve tables, and afford a year's tuition at a public or private university, right? Not that long ago, okay? Obviously not the case now. It takes 4 years to do the same thing, right? So just talking about this perspective, I think hopefully can begin to establish some respect at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm interested in kind of like discussing that further because I think that the climate has changed so much. Speaking of stats, I'm pulling this from the Harvard Institute of Politics youth poll recently. There's been a sharp increase in youth believing that, quote, political involvement rarely has tangible results. That's 36%. And 42% felt that their vote wouldn't make a difference. And a lot of people agree that politics today are no longer able to meet the challenges the country is facing. That's 56%. I was wondering if you guys could talk about like why that is and kind of why you guys have lost faith in the system and what a politician could do to earn it back. Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say that it all depends on how you view your vote, where like your vote as your only means to make a difference, that is where I personally have lost faith. But when you view your vote as like one tool in your civic engagement toolkit, then like that kind of gets you to a place where it is just the beginning of your involvement rather than the end. And so the electoral system is not able to fix everything, not to shock everyone here. But it is one power that if you are lucky enough to live in a state where exercising it is not basically impossible because of voter disenfranchisement, like then that is something that is important to use in addition to kind of all of these other tools that you have at your disposal, which do you want to talk more about what we try to do?
Yeah, we do a lot. I mean, I think another important note, I think, is that like a lot of Gen Z, I think I can speak for both Aidan and I when I say this, that like the presidency that we have the most memory of is Trump's, right? And that was when we saw at a young, formative age that someone could win by 3 million votes and still not end up president. So we look at our votes and we're like, what is actually happening? And the same that's happened with, of course, our Senate majority, so to speak, of course, that we're not able to get what we want done considering we went out and we voted in the numbers that we did. With that being said, a lot of what Gen Z for Change does in particular is we use digital tools because that's what we're best at. Like, we know the internet better than everyone. We grew up on the internet. I got on Google for the first time when I was 5. Like, it's really that simple. But I'm a computer science major myself, so a lot of what I do and some of the work that we do at Gen Z for Change is coding websites and tools to allow people to streamline digital civic engagement. So we had, there was a tip line in Texas that would be to report people getting abortions after SB 8 was passed, and what we did is we coded a script to spam it with lines from the B-movie and song lyrics. Was rendered unusable. We did the same exact thing with the anti-CRT tip line that Governor Glenn Youngkin had made in Virginia following his election this past year. So I think that's what the great thing about our generation is that, like, because of this slight distrust, we go beyond just the voting, just the ballot box. There's also, I will note and be cognizant of the fact that we vote in lesser numbers than older generations, and I think that part of that goes back to our civics education as well. How, like, it stops at, like, vote, not teaching people how to vote, not teaching people, like, down ballot voting, which is substantially more important than the larger elections. Like, the midterms are up this year, and midterms, people vote substantially less than in the presidential election. So I think making sure that we bridge that gap, and that's what we're trying to do with our organization.
And John, I guess, like, how have you seen this kind of shift over time and this, like, loss of faith in the system, and what do you think is leading to it?
Yeah, Taylor, this is something that I've thought a lot about over the last several months when we released that survey. Over the last 21, so I've been studying young Americans for 21 years now, and there've been.
I'm 21.
Right, the students weren't even born. So, right, and I'll give you a history lesson then.
Yeah.
So there have been 2 opportunities in the last 21 years where those attitudes have changed about the efficacy of politics, okay? Both times, 6 months later, we saw historic levels of participation, pre and post 9/11 for the millennial generation, and essentially pre and post the Trump administration. Okay? Now, and that led to, by the way, a doubling of youth participation in the 2018 midterms. So when baby boomers, when Gen Xers, and when millennials were young people, they voted at half the level in midterms that your generation voted at. Okay.
That was my first election in 2018.
Much more to go, okay? But you're already changing that. Similar thing happened in 2020. But what I think we're seeing, Taylor, is perhaps a new era of civic engagement where you can believe, as Aidan said, that politics the act of voting has less tangible results than perhaps we would like it to be, but people are still choosing to vote because you have to, because the urgency of the issues are so significant, and it's just one aspect of your overall civic engagement. I do believe that that could be happening this summer and this fall, as long as everyone begins to talk about how it's just one piece and you can't stop at the voting.
So, getting back to mental health, John, you were mentioning sort of, some of these horrifying stats about everything. I was shocked just at that 24% of people, I think, reported depression or hopelessness. 71% of young people agreed that there's a mental health crisis in America. What do you think it is? What is the cause of this? Because I feel like, this was all despite the lifting of COVID restrictions. There was basically no improvement in mental health. And certainly I feel like the narrative in the press was like, oh, well, it's lockdown that's led to this. But it seems like that's just not, the factor kind of behind everything. Although I'm sure it was very hard for some people. What do you guys think is leading to this mental health crisis? And how do you cope?
I think I would say that, like, if you're looking to understand why young people are so depressed, like, with all due respect, like, look around. Like, maybe not here in Aspen because it's incredibly beautiful, but like, take a look at our country where we have grown up in what feels often like a dystopia, and where, like, most of our childhood and young adulthood has been defined by the Trump administration, now Roe v. Wade being overturned. Like, these are the main issues that are on our political conscience. And I think that I think that, especially with social media, you can't escape these things, which can be viewed as for better or for worse. I think it's for better because these tragedies are, and these terrible events are happening, and they have always been happening. And now we are just having much better visibility into them. And so I think that is one part of it. And I think that the way that I avoid kind of giving in and being hopeless is the team of people that I work with and the generation that I'm a part of, because it's hard to be hopeless when you're surrounded by people who consistently and at every turn channel anger and fear into action. And I think that source of inspiration makes it impossible to kind of to accept the hopelessness that kind of is always on our minds.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of our formative years have been marked by tragedy. Like three or 4 months before the lockdown started, there was a school shooting at my sister's high school. And of course that like upended our lives in many ways. But the other thing, going back to Aidan's point, the sense of community, I was, as disgusting and dystopian as it sounds, I was able to go to another of my friend whose siblings survived a school shooting and was like, how do I deal with this, right? So we're the school shooting generation. Climate change is consistently upending our lives. California, where I live, has been in a drought since I was 7. I don't know what rain and green looks like. So this is the craziest environment for me to be in personally. Like it's the most green I've ever seen in my entire life. Like when I go to New York City, I'm like, oh my God, trees. And that's New York City. Anyways, point being that I think that much to Aidan's point, right when we got the draft of the Roe release, we got into Zoom and we started working. We were on Zoom until maybe, it was 10 p.m. my time, so I don't know what time it was yours. But sometime at like 10 p.m. we wanted to like care for ourselves. This idea of self-care, which some people say that Gen Z is soft or whatever, but I feel like that is how we're able to preserve our wellness when there's so much tumultuous news constantly, and we're always consuming that news with social media. So we did Just Dance really quickly and then went back to work, which... If
you don't know what Just Dance is...
Just Dance is a Wii game where you dance. And there's like YouTube videos.
It's very complicated.
It's not that complicated.
You dance, you follow along, it's a relaxing activity. The point is that it's just like, even in these, because like doing the Just Dance, to, I forget what song it was. I think it was
Toxic by Britney Spears.
Toxic by Britney Spears. Yeah. The like as a break from 3 hours or 4 hours of work around like the Roe release, like was the craziest feeling, because we were all horrified, we were all shocked, but not surprised, and in fear, but we just persisted because that's what we had to do, and we danced. We just danced.
Yeah, and to contextualize further, Aidan and I met for the first time earlier this year. Was it this year? Yeah, like the majority of Gen Z, not the majority, basically all of Gen Z for Change has met online. We've created these communities online. We are all from different cities and are located all across the entire country. So that is one of the great takeaways from social media, is that we're able to create community that transcends borders in a way that I don't think has ever been done before. And I think that's one of the things that have kept us the most sane in these crazy times.
If I could add, one of the things so the question was like, what is driving the anxiety and the depression and the stress of your generation? We didn't mention really technology and the phone, which was generally, a lot of adults say, it's just the phone, it's just the phone, it's just the phone, right? What I discovered in 2017 when I started, talking to young people, I would ask the same questions for the previous 15 years, but in 2017, a couple months after the Trump administration, the answers were very different. What connects us? Fear, anxiety, et cetera. And for the first time, I think, which is a difference between your generation and others, is the weight of the public policy issues in the news that is adding the additional stress that already includes homework, personal relationships, identity, all the other things that all adolescents have had to go through. And I think getting back to your other point about civics, the fact that we're not teaching civics, the fact that we're afraid in too many classrooms to have a conversation about the issues that you're talking about, drives people to be concerned, depressed, maybe hopeless. drives some people to search online, and a small fraction, but an important number, into places that are very, very dangerous. Because we're not willing to have conversations, not about Biden or Trump or whatever, but about climate, about inequality, about systemic racism, those sorts of things.
And it feels insane to say, but like Republicans are actively making those specific adolescent issues so much harder, where if you're in Florida, which a lot of our team is, our political strategy associate led the walkouts in Florida over the Don't Say Gay bill, where if you are dealing with something as a young person and you're dealing with your identity and you have grown up in a community where you don't have someone to talk to, but you feel safe talking to someone at school, now, and we're seeing these restrictive laws being passed all across the country, you can't seek that support from your teachers like you kind of could in the past, and it's hard to even contextualize how it's just it's almost like you want to say to these lawmakers, why are you are just making it harder to be a young person in a time when it is already so hard. And it's hard to even wrap my mind around.
Aidan, just for last little stat here, but it's an important one to get on the table. After a period of stability from 2000 to 2012 or so around youth suicide, when Gen Zers turned into adolescents, 15, 16 years old, there was a 47% increase in the number of deaths by suicide among young people across every single state in America.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually part of that goes back to social media, and I'm not it's the phones type person, but social media companies simply, at least at that point, did not care what we were consuming, because I got on social media in 2011 when I was 11, and the things that I was taking in, and the things that a lot of people were taking in, there was a lot of content glorifying eating disorders, glorifying mental health disorders, glorifying suicide, and people were actively posting about these things, and we were consistently taking this in like it was nothing. That has completely changed the way that so many of us think, not only about ourselves, but about the world at large, and the way that our brains function, because our brains are still porous at that age. So for these, and I think it goes back to this conversation about trust, where it's we inherited such a strange world, and back to Aidan's point, now we're not even legally allowed to, at least in Florida, talk to teachers about issues of identity. How are we supposed to maintain that trust? It seems borderline impossible at times.
I was wondering if there are any kind of famous figures or politicians that you guys think that are a little bit older that have done a really good job of building trust among young people. I'll
say Congressman Jamie Raskin, so I'm from Washington D.C., and we kind of consider him our de facto voting representative in Congress. No offense to Eleanor Holmes Norton, but I think that what Congressman Raskin does with his Democracy Now or summer program is empower young leaders, and it's done there's a lot to be learned from how certain politicians are going about this, where you're not entering a conversation with the mindset of, young person, I am going to teach you something, you will internalize it and move forward. It is we will offer the learnings that we have gathered, and then we will listen to you to create a more productive future, because if all of these learnings were perfect, then things would not be so terrible. And I think that is really important, that we enter this intergenerational dialogue with both expecting and ready to learn from the other generations, rather than expecting just to teach.
Yeah, I think it's the people who I'm trying to think of specifics, but it is very difficult. At least people who other people know. There's a new person on our organization, Jeremy, who is, I have no idea how old he is, but he's a person who Aidan had known in the past, and it's like when we have these conversations about what we're doing within the organization, it's not like he's talking for us, he's talking with us, right? Like actively, like we all have equal seats at the table, not that like, while he knows more than us about these different areas, he's taking us in and cares about our, all of our ideas and all of our perspectives as if they were also his own. And there's also like places like this where it's like, it's kind of rough to be a young person here because you don't really see yourself, at Aspen at least. And I was at a speaker's reception the other day and like no one would talk to me, but Rob and his wife came up to me and we're like very kind, like initiated conversation. I think that's another thing, like leaning in to conversation with young people where it's not like, again, you're not talking down to them, you're talking with them, which is incredibly important and makes us feel substantially more heard in the conversations that we have.
Because there's a lot of like support that young people do need from other generations. Like with Gen Z for Change, I didn't want to file our 501c4 incorporation paperwork. I don't want to file our taxes. I don't know how to do that. I just graduated high school. I don't want to have to do that. And so, like, there are these things that we look for adult expertise in, and that includes like learning how to fundraise properly and learning how to work with more established organizations while keeping our own like values always like at the front of our minds. And so there is, and I think that John does a great job of like listening to young people and trying to communicate those ideas, especially to older generations, in a way that is more palatable.
Well, you're doing that right now, and showing by example your willingness to collaborate, you know, with others. That's something that far few leaders really appreciate. And I think there's this opportunities for you to be mentored, you know, but also for you to kind of mentor up, right? Mm-hmm. Every organization on the planet would love the skills that you have about so many things, TikTok just being one of them, right? Or the passion of how you think, Aidan, how you connect all the dots around civic engagement. Every organization could benefit from that as they're trying to recruit and retain the next generation of employees. So I just think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for everyone around collaboration.
So John, you just wrote this book on Gen Z. I'm curious, what surprised you the most? Like, was there anything that you were like, huh?
Oh, that's a big question. I think like the most gratifying thing for me has been the outpouring, relatively speaking. It's my, you know, but of interest among parents, among older people. Almost a day barely a day goes by where I don't get a text of something from someone who feels responsible for the shape of the world today. They want to find ways to help. So that's been a really gratifying thing that I could never have expected. I think that's one thing, seeing that from other parents who do want to help. The other thing is, as I've been talking about this book on college campuses and other places, I found like a lack of confidence in younger people, right? Before they know what I'm going to talk about, I'll ask a student and they'll say, I say, well, you know, I talk about, you know, generations, and they say, oh, we suck. Gen Z sucks. You know, we're always on our phones. We're this, we're that. And I said, why do you know, that's what our professors say, and this is what the media says. I said, listen, if not for younger people, if not for you guys, Donald Trump is president today. Today, we don't have our first African-American woman on the Supreme Court. You know, climate is further rolled back. There's not a response to Uvalde, et cetera. That your generation has already made a significant change. Without a doubt, the big 5 states that were the battleground states, if not for young people choosing Biden by over 21 points on average, Donald Trump wins. He won the vote of everybody over the age of 40. So this generation has already made a tremendous impact, and I think they need to understand the power, and that's what you're doing, right?
And that's why we're always very focused on because we can say these massive numbers about our coalition reaches more people than MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News combined every single day. We can say that. We can say, but it's often hard for people to understand how that like translates into action. And so that is where like our tangible real world change making comes in, where like in Texas, like the fact that the pro-life whistleblower tip line was taken down, like that is a tangible benefit to abortion seekers in Texas. And kind of our work around to support Starbucks unionization efforts, where we've developed tools that over 140,000 people have used to send in false job applications to specific Starbucks locations where they're trying to hire scabs for
in place of the union organizers.
Yeah, in place of union organizers, where like there are these tangible differences that we feel like we have made that we kind of try to use to prove the legitimacy of these tools. And I think that when it comes to like support, because that's the question that like we get the most often, is like, what can we do to support? And it gets to a complicated place where like the answer might not always be exactly what people want, where the answer is like supporting young people and also knowing when to defer to young people and to give them the resources to do the work. And I think that is something that is developing, and we'll see where that goes.
Awesome. Well, I want to make time for some questions. So does anyone out here have Heather? It looks like you raised your hand right up in front. I think he's going to come over with a mic.
Hi, Aidan. I'm always interested in thought leaders that activate, and we're seeing you at a very young age being an impressive speaker, and we have an impressive bio. But what led to what are the personal experiences that you had that led you to create the idea for Gen Z Activate? Or what were the first initial steps that you took?
Yeah, I did not set out to create an organization. I set out to organize a phone bank for Biden in September of 2020. And it turns out that relational organizing is a very, very powerful tool. And so like when I was recruiting my friends who were other TikTok creators, it snowballed to I thought we were gonna have 10 creators, it ended up being 500 creators. And when I realized this should be more than a phone bank. And I think that always like thinking, I've never allowed myself to get lost in thinking too far in advance, because then you just lose focus on actually how you get there. And so I think that like my mentality is focus on today and be conscious of tomorrow and what we're setting up. And also like never losing focus on working with others, because I mean, I think we all do, and I think I have so many blind spots, and there is so much that I have to learn. And I think that within Gen Z for Change, it is so collaborative, where we are all working together all the time, and decision making always so far has been unanimous, where we all through discussion like find things that we agree on. And it's created a sense of community that I think is hard to cultivate.
Okay, next question. Oh, we've got a bunch. I'll go with you, Rob, here.
Very impressive what you've built. I'm curious, as you look to the future with your organization, what type of help do you need? Where do you see the organization 3, 5, 10 years from now? And what kind of help do you need from the outside to facilitate that?
I'll do the second part. Do you want to do the first part?
You're the executive director.
I'll do that. I'll think about the future. I think that I kind of like my mentality is we have an amazing team of activists, like on the ground activists, digital activists, and as long as we continue to build this collaborative working environment, and we hold true to our values, then we will end up in a place that we are happy with. And there is, of course, like some specific down the line thinking that we have about registering young people to vote and longer term partnerships that we want to do. But I think that to answer the second part, when it comes to support, it is honestly a matter of and I hate to do a little funding pitch here, but the thing is,
do it.
I'll do it. But there is, as many of you know, not a lot of money in the youth nonprofit space, where we have been like doing this work for now like
2 years.
like 2 years, which in terms of our lifetime it feels like a lot.
10% of my life.
And we only were able to start paying people like our core leadership team like 20 an hour about a week ago, and everyone is putting in like full-time or high-level part-time jobs where everyone is a student and has an additional job. Like we try to make the work as accessible as possible, and we're all in it. We know we're all in it for the right reasons, but the barriers to accessing these opportunities means that people can spend a lot of time on Gen Z for Change, but then there's a ton of schoolwork they have to do, and then they have to go to their job as a cashier or a tutor or a Door Dasher, and that is, to be honest, the main source of support that we need.
If I may add, Aidan also has refused to take any pay until all of us get paid because he's amazing and selfless. So there's, I would clap for that. He's great. Yeah, I think that, back to his point, I feel like a lot of us, if we could, we would do all of this work full time. And the fact of the matter is that there's also just like not that much money in it. A lot of us are also political creators on TikTok. Brands will not touch you if you talk about politics at all. So we only get funding from smaller nonprofits when we are creating videos. If any of you know about the influencer economy, a lot of brands now are reaching out to influencers to have them do the advertisement for them. So now we can still speak out about social issues and get a little bit of funding, but we still have to have like multiple jobs on the side and stuff. And we do really, especially with the midterms, want to be doing this work full time because there is so much work to be done. Like I feel like, personally speaking, the midterms are easily like one of the most horrifying things to me right now because it's like we're on this teeter-totter between like maybe being okay and like fascism and authoritarianism, which doesn't feel very cool as a youth. So I think, yeah, the greatest support, I mean, listening to us, of course, funding is helpful too. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's our little pitch.
We're going to try and get through all them. Okay, in the blue, or well, we'll do both of you guys. We'll do you first and then you. Sorry, I point at both of you. And then you.
Thank you. And I got to ask you guys both questions earlier in today's session. I wanted to build off of Sofia's point, which was certain funders won't touch what you guys do because of who you are. I'm curious, a lot of your tactics and what makes your campaign so brilliant is how unorthodox they are and how much they kind of push the limits of what's kind of legal limits in some ways. I'm curious, as you have gained prominence and you get invited to spaces like this, do you feel pressure at all to clean up your act or act in a certain way or become more polished for the sake of your elders in a way that you think might influence or impact your work?
I'd say yes. I mean, Taylor and I had a conversation about this yesterday in your meeting, just initially, and there's this idea that youth, especially activist youth, people who have done a lot of great things as young people, have to just be like mini adults. Like we don't have fun and go on sleepovers and stuff. Like we're still young, we're still kids and all those things. I feel a slight need to polish myself up, but I also feel like when I do that, I concede a part of my identity, like the scrappy part of myself that wants to do things in a little bit of a crazier way. I will add that everything I do is legal. I have looked it up.
We are branded by legal counsel.
I am not trying to get arrested, not in my agenda at all. But
right.
yeah.
I think it's just about like we're not trying to do things that organizations have done in the past. We're trying to do our own thing. We're trying and we're of course listening and learning. We are happy and proud to be disruptors because that's what has worked for us, and that's what we know our biggest value comes from.
Next question right here, and then we'll get...
It's not a question. I'll make it very brief. Sofia and Aidan, God bless you. As an adult, it gives me so much hope that there are folks like you willing to get involved. I don't agree with everything that you've said today. I would encourage you to be open-minded. There are Republicans and conservatives who are solid citizens and good people.
I don't disagree.
We need to be careful not to group people with labels and to look at the individuals. But I just really want to express my gratitude to both of you. Even though I don't agree with everything, I am thrilled that you're doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Building trust, I love it. We'll just do back in the white, or in the black and then the white. Sorry, I keep pointing at groups of two.
As someone who considers themselves an elder, my contemporaries all agree that we grew up in the best of times, post-World War II, up until 9/11. And we agree that it is harder for the younger generation, for our children and our grandchildren, to move forward in today's world. It's harder for them to buy homes near where they work. It's generally tougher today. But you know, time goes on, and someday you guys are going to be where we are. And how do you think the younger generation is going to view you, as you don't trust the older generation? Will the younger generation, when you're grown up, will they trust you?
The question for people that didn't hear is, yes, will the generation after you guys trust you?
No, and that's okay.
Yeah, I can make peace with that.
I think it's just about accepting that part of this is cyclical and it does repeat. And I hope that our generation, when we get there, keeps in mind the mentality that we have now and supports the younger generations.
In the white here.
The social media has so many positive benefits, but it has so many frightening negative attributes, bullying and anonymity and the spreading of falsehoods and conspiracy theories. If you all could fix that in social media, what would be your fix?
Ooh.
Government regulation.
Okay.
Well, there's very specific legislation that could be passed. The California Kids Code, for example, I'm from California. There is an issue where targeted advertisement is sending kids down these rabbit holes, like, for example, the eating disorder content. That is many times given through these algorithms, these faceless algorithms that are being coded by one or two people who do not represent the general public, right? So the California Kids Code, the goal is to ensure that the design of these platforms have the people first, namely the young people first, the people who are using this multiple hours every single day. Additionally, I do think that data harvesting is a very, very large issue. Like, let's take into account January 6th, for example. They mobilized on Facebook, a platform that did not have enough government oversight, in my opinion, where they were, because of the targeted advertisement, the algorithms, based on one thing that they clicked, they would go deeper and deeper into the same content, right? Sorry, I'm a computer science major. I'm trying to not get too techy here. But point being, I think the government has a very core responsibility to ensure that disinformation does not get to the point where it begins to incite violence, which has happened many, many times. This was the same thing that happened with the Buffalo shooter, radicalized online. And I think that the sooner that we have the right amount of oversight and accountability for tech companies, like genuine fines and issues with the things that they've created, especially like the tumultuous times they've created in our lives, the sooner we'll get to a place where social media actually serves everyone.
John, any final thoughts on that?
Just to wholeheartedly agree, but also, how about banners if you need help? If you have a question, if you want someone to talk to, that could just be throughout all the content. Because as we said, there are tens of millions of young Americans looking for that, help.
Amazing. Well, we are out of time. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you, Aidan, Sofia, John. Great.